I didn't know any of that.
You didn't know any of that? No. Okay. So yes, the back of your Sony lens cap is 18% gray, and that's why they're gray, and they're meant to be used for white balance. All right, welcome back to the latest episode of Game Day Glare. I'm Lance. I'm with E. This is the podcast for sports videographers. How you doing, E?
Doing good. Working hard as usual. Hardly working, maybe. Who knows?
Maybe.
I'm just talking shit.
You've been posting a lot on your YouTube lately. You've been really consistent. You've been, I've noticed a lot more videos. So you have been working hard.
Well, I've been trying. I think, first of all, this is something I always try to do and rarely actually achieve it. But I think once I got one that kind of got some traction, and it motivated me to make sure I keep that momentum going, because that's what they say about YouTube. It's like it's a bit of a momentum thing sometimes. So yeah, I'm trying to keep it going, which seems to be working, not to the level that I wish it was, but it is better, and it's fun, and it's good to have like consistent content coming out, because you get more interactions, you get more feedback. Yeah, it all comes together because when you're not online for a few weeks, people forget about you, and then it's you have to start all over again almost.
Yeah, and you have to get used to the routine too. Like we took the break from Game Day Glare, and all of a sudden I realized too, our numbers dropped off, our social clips dropped off, and it's like, okay, you got to start pushing through. I've been pretty busy. Preseason just wrapping up in the NHL. The regular season is just around the corner. So for today's topic, I kind of looked to your YouTube for inspiration. A couple weeks ago, you talked about color correction. So I said, you know what? Let's break down E's YouTube tutorial on color correction. It is something we do get asked a lot, right? About color correction. It is one of those topics that a lot of people struggle with. It does take a little bit more time, a little bit more patience. So we thought we'd break it down for you guys and go over, how we colorize things, how our color correction process is, and how you guys can improve on it too, because it's something as a videographer that is a must know nowadays.
But I would start by saying that there is obviously ways to put all the odds in your favor and make sure that you're at the top of the line in terms of like quality and things like that. But when it comes to actual color grading specifically, it's highly subjective. Like it's one look might look good to me. It might look pretty shit to you. It's all a question of taste and what we prefer. And so it's creative. It's there's a direction, and some people will like it, some people won't. But in terms of like actually using the tools the right way, and how to use them properly and in a convenient, effective kind of way, that's what we'll be talking about today, I guess.
Well, I didn't know that we're quoting the Hunger Games. I don't know if you realized that. You said may the odds be in your favor. Is that what you started off with? So I didn't know we're throwing out Hunger Games quotes here, but I would have got some ready. But I definitely think
I was trying to.
That's it. That's it. I definitely think that, yeah, you're right. It is so subjective, because you could color grade your main shot and then you could throw a look on it and it can be completely different. And it is very subjective. Now, when I think of color grading, honestly, the thing that I'm focusing on first always, or when I think about my color, is a white balance. And I think that's where it really all starts, is like in camera. I'm trying to make sure I have the best white balance set on my camera. And then I feel like everything else kind of flows off that. Now, I'm gonna throw a question off to you. What's your first step when you have the wrong white balance? And then we'll talk about maybe how we can secure that we have the proper white balance in camera. But you have the right white balance. What's your workaround? Or do you want to talk about your white balance process first and then your workaround?
Well, my white balance process is pretty easy, where I either just like stick to, if I'm outdoors, I'll stick to like a daylight preset, which is 5600K. But if it's in the evening and then eventually the lights come on, then I'll have to adjust. Uh, because once the neon light, like if I'm indoors, for example, which is roughly the same temperature as the stadium lights, but I'll probably be more. I'll set it up manually, but I don't necessarily do like a proper white balance per se. I just know that it's going to be somewhere between. It's going to be in the in the 4,000s, like between 4,100 and 4,900, somewhere like that. So I'll typically just set it and forget it, sort of thing. And I do make mistakes, and especially outdoors when you go from daylight to just stadium lights, there's going to be an awkward transition. The second half, pretty much, it's we're in full spotlight stadium lights mode, so I can definitely adjust. But the end of the first half of the game is definitely going to be a bit messy. So when I do get shots that have colors all over the place, my way of doing it, and I'm not saying it's the absolute best way, it's just my way. When I do everything in Premiere. So in Premiere Pro, I'll have my Lumetri color tab open, and I'll just color pick something white, and to let Premiere kind of do a rough job. If it doesn't make sense, because sometimes it just doesn't, like it's way too yellow or way too blue, I'll adjust it a bit. But then to fine tune it, if that wasn't enough, if I can still see something a bit too orangey, or because usually what happens is that the highlights and the shadows are kind of in two different color spaces. So I'll go in the, I think it's called color wheel and match, something like that. It's basically where you can color correct the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights separately. And in there, I'll adjust the shadows first of all, and then I'll probably fine tune the highlights if need be. Because if I see, like, the highlights are an easy one. Like if you look at the sky and you can see that it looks a bit yellowish or orangey or something like that, then it's because probably your shot to begin with was too blue, so you brought it back way over the warmer side, and then that makes like your whites look a bit orange and yellow. So if you go into your highlights and you go more towards the blue, then it kind of balances the fact that you had to make everything else way warmer just to look normal, but then readjust your highlights for them to look normal. So it's playing with that shadows, midtone, and highlights to balance everything out. And at the end of the day, like, there's obviously scopes that you can use to make sure that every color is where it's meant to be. But especially in sports where the action is moving around, so different, especially I'm thinking of a football field. Some parts of the field will look a bit different. Some are brighter, some are darker, some have different color temperatures, not by much, but enough so that when you're cutting from one to the other in your video, you can see kind of a little difference. So, sorry for that reason. Yeah, it's just important to understand how to adjust differently the shadows and highlights and everything. And but yeah, I was gonna say that basically even that is kind of subjective. Like it's to you have to kind of trust what you're looking at and not just go by the scopes. And if you look at it and it makes sense to you, it makes it looks like, I try to look at the skin. If the skin looks like the skin of that person, that's a very good indicative. And if you look at something white and it actually looks white, doesn't look like a bit off white, that's another good sign. So I look at things like that, and if everything looks like it's the color that it should be, then I'm good with that. Like, I'm not gonna spend 5 hours, fine tuning and all that. Like, I'll slap a color, a LUT, a creative LUT on it, and call it a day.
You know what? I try really hard just to make sure that I get my white balance properly in my camera. And it's funny, like only like 2 years ago, I found out that the big Sony secret that like your lens cap is an 18% gray, which is perfect for white balance.
Right.
So I try to use my lens cap because I always have an extra lens cap with me. In case I have to change lenses, you use the back of the lens cap and you do your white balance on that manually. And that's pretty good. I used to use, so I don't know if you guys ever heard this, but I used to use like jerseys and stuff like that sometimes for white balance. And then I found out that like it's probably not a good idea to do that because a lot of jerseys, even though they look white, the camera doesn't see them as a pure white. So if you pick the white balance on a jersey, it actually throws off your color and you're much better off to use that lens cap. So that's what I do. I use lens cap and I try
didn't
to
know
use.
any of that.
You didn't know any of that? No. Okay. So
No.
yes, the back of your Sony lens cap is 18% gray, and that's why they're gray and they're meant to be used for white balance. Also, I try and use the tools in my camera. So whether it's
And
white
what's
balance,
like before we move on to the
yeah.
camera, like what's the difference between a white balance on a gray card or a white card? Like which one's better and what's the difference?
So the gray card is actually more accurate, supposedly. The white, you kind of overexpose it a bit. So then that was sort of my second part. You got to use the other tools like zebra, waveforms, and false color, because the camera has a harder time picking up pure white. Where the gray, it's easier for the camera to know exactly where that gray is, which fixes your whole white balance properly. Which is yeah, it's one of those things because when we were younger, we used to just hold up a piece of white paper and be like this, and then it goes because we actually all use photograph cameras, right? And when still photography, people take colors, they have a color card, and gray is the main focus on that color card. It has all the other colors, but gray is the main focus. So these cameras actually balance better on a gray card, which is the same reason why your Sony cap is gray. Yeah. Good to know, eh? So I also use my zebras, my waveform, and false color too. I don't always use them. Zebras I always use. Zebras I always use because I'm afraid of overexposure and that. But it does help you with your color. Now, we are very fortunate. If you have the FX3, you can have your camera in log, and you can actually have a user profile, which actually shows you what your color is supposed to look like, right? And since this is subjective too, always try to make sure it looks the way that you want to. Now, I understand that these monitors on the back of our camera or our displays that we're using, external displays, they're not always perfect. But if you can get them as close to as possible as the way that you want it to look, it will save you time in post. So these are just little tips that help you be a little bit more consistent. And one thing I try to do is if I'm filming a certain block, I'm not going to change my white balance during that block. If for some reason my white balance is off, and it's not off because the sun is changing or the light in the stadium is changing, I'm filming something, I'm going to live with that white balance. And then I know if I have to make an adjustment later on, it's to all of it. It's not just to a little section of it. And that helps big time. And it saves you a lot of time because you'll only have to color correct one shot, one scene, and you can apply that to all the other scenes.
That makes sense. Jeez, I learned a lot. And
You didn't
we're
know that?
only 13 minutes into the episode.
That's it. That's it. All right, I'm done. I'm out.
Yeah. No, but yeah, I don't really use gray cards or anything. I think like that's yeah, I'm learning a lot. Thanks.
Actually, I want to talk about something because when we first started this show, I used to shoot an S-Cinetone all the time because I thought it was faster, and E used to always shoot an S-Log 3, and I started listening to E, unfortunately, and now I only shoot an S-Log 3, and I find it a lot easier to shoot an S-Log 3 than it was an S-Cinetone. Because in S-Cinetone, it's like you're shooting your footage and you have a LUT on it already, and your colors have to really be dialed in to maximize that shot. Where when I shoot an S-Log, I have so much more room to play with. So, and it makes it a lot easier for if you're underexposed, overexposed, your white balance, all that, compared to the S-Log 3. Compared to the S-Cinetone. So, I mean, it is something that I had to, change my workflow because I was doing a lot of stuff fast and having to get stuff out there. But once you get used to it, it doesn't really take you that much more time. And that's what I was always afraid of. So, that is something that I did learn from UE too, is like just, shoot an S-Log, trust the process. And once you know how to work your LUTs, or you have some good plugins, some good plugin LUTs in that too, it speeds up your
Hmm.
workflow. And you could push the boundaries a lot easier and faster.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, because like I always get asked, like, what's the best picture profile, like for sports or whatever, and it's like this. It's not like often when people ask that question, they want like the best look. They think like the one is going to give them a so much better look than the other. And when it comes to looks, that's subjective. Like what looks good to me might not look good to you. Like what makes a picture profile better than another, is its dynamic range, basically what how you're able to have, dark shadows and bright highlights in the same shot, and not basically destroy one to get the other right, or like, so by having a flat profile. So basically, the answer to that question is like the flatter, the better. So if you have like if you're shooting in S-Log 3, everything is extremely flat. So you're able to have details in a white uniform under bright lights and still have details in the shadows. If you're using like an A7 III and you have like more of a contrasty picture profile, chances are, if you're filming the same shot, maybe you'll get the uniform right, but everything that's in the shadows will be lost and it'll just look black. And or vice versa. You'll get your shadows right, but your uniforms will be overexposed. And I'm not shitting on the A7 III. It's actually a full frame camera. It's a good camera, but I'm talking more about like the picture profiles. If you use like the old ones, that have like contrast baked in, that's when it becomes difficult to shoot highlights and shadows in the same shot. So by using something that's a bit flatter, and if it's not S-Log 3 or S-Log 2, because you're shooting in 8-bit and you don't really have the ability to play around with the footage that much, in terms of like exposure and colors, without starting to almost tear it apart and make it pixelated and stuff. um, I would use a picture profile. Like, no picture profile is actually not bad, like just turning off picture profiles, or choose one that is flatter, that doesn't have that much saturation in it, that doesn't have that much contrast in it. I think in Canon they call it like neutral. So it's a lot more, it's a lot easier than to capture everything at its best, and then you can in post kind of add those things if you want to. But to have them baked in, that's usually when you sacrifice something, whether it's the highlights or the shadows. So yeah, all that to say that the answer to what the best picture profile is, it's usually the flatter one, but that also means probably more work in post production.
So I've been shooting S-Log 3 for quite some time now, ever since I got the FX3. And when I did Media Day a couple of weeks ago, they asked me to shoot it in S-Cinetone. And I didn't even know where to go in my menu to change it, because you know how you have the variable ISO
Yeah,
in on FX3? If you have that on, you can't pick a picture profile.
it's not as least specific to variable I. So it's the log mode that you need to turn off, basically.
It was locked, and I could not. It took me like 10 minutes to figure out how to turn it off. And then I asked them, I said, well, why are you guys shooting in S-Cinetone? And they were just like, well, this is what we do. And I'm like, well, why? And no one really had the exact answer. And then they asked, why did I shoot S-Log 3? And I told them it actually made my workflow easier, especially when you have to match up clips from different shoots and different time periods or different locations. It really made my workflow a lot easier. I did like S-Cinetone, and I will use it if I need to, but having the extra you know matching ability with S-Log 3, it makes your workflow a lot easier. So don't be afraid of it, because at first I felt like I was kind of afraid with it. Like, you feel like, oh, you have to shoot S-Log 3, you have to do this. You don't have to. Do what you feel comfortable with, and make
Mm.
sure that you're getting the best product with what your profile you're shooting with. And for me, it became S-Log 3, where I didn't want to use S-Log 3. I thought S-Cinetone was saving me a step, and it turns out it wasn't saving me a step. It was actually adding on a step.
I don't know if it's adding, but it's definitely not, because ultimately when I'm shooting in this log 3, I use the same conversion LUT all the time, and I have it imported in my camera. So when I look at my footage, I'm seeing the footage the way it's going to look once I add the conversion LUT on. So I'm seeing it the same way you would be seeing your footage if you're shooting in S-Cinetone. I see it as it's going to end up. And then when I import that footage into my editing suite, I basically select all, right click, go to colors, add the conversion LUT, and boom, everything looks exactly how I filmed it. So yes, there's one extra step in theory, but it's like 2 clicks, takes half a second, and I'm right back where you are with your S-Cinetone. So like if I'm sacrificing dynamic range to save 2 clicks, like I don't really see the purpose, especially that like the cameras, they allow you to import custom LUTs for that reason. So if you're buying a more expensive camera that has all these features that can make you a better videographer, and you choose not to use them because they're not convenient enough for you, then it's on you. Like it's like if you're always going for the auto settings, or like when that's the thing. When people ask me what's the best picture profile, what's the best aperture, what's the best this, it's like it's always, it depends on your environment. If that's your mentality, that I'm just gonna set in a white balance, an aperture, a picture profile, and never touch my camera again, other than pressing record, like you're not attacking this from the right state of mind. You might as well just put like an action cam or something and just let it capture in auto, because ultimately probably approaching your movements and your composition with the exact same energy. So what's the point?
Well, one of my issues was too. So the FX3, you have your user profiles, right? So you were able to put that neutral LUT into your camera.
Mm-hmm.
My A7 IV did not have the option at first, but Sony's updated it. Now you have the option. So when I go on a shoot and I'm filming log and I put on the user profile where I see the LUT, they're exactly the same. It's the exact same color. So it's made my workflow so much smoother. Where before I usually had to adjust my A7 IV just a little bit. It was never really exact. But now they're exact. So it saved me. And that's what actually helped me push me more to S-Log 3 also, was that little update, that little convenience. I knew 100% those cameras were exactly the same. As long as I had the same white balance and I had the same lighting, I was good with them. So that's one of the reasons why too.
So once you get into the edit, what's the word, like how do you go about color correction?
So I bought this LUT pack off Beyond the Game, and I just slap it on and it does it all for me. I wish it was that easy. I wish it was that easy. But like you, I think my first step is always my conversion LUT. I put my conversion LUT on, and then I kind of balance out. For some reason, I check my exposure. I balance out my colors right away before I start giving it a look. And I'll fiddle around with like an S. I'll go in the creative also, and I'll fiddle around with like an S curve on my white balance and that. And I find that really gives it a nice pop to the image. So I feel like I don't have to do much to my image if I've nailed my white balance. And then obviously from there, it's more of a creative standpoint. Do I want to add a creative LUT? Do I want to give it a little bit of a vignette? Do I want to give it a little bit more contrast? I'll take it from there. But I'm always starting off with my neutral conversion LUT, and then I'm making sure my white balance is dialed in. What about you? I mean, because don't get me wrong, I have a lot of fun. Like I have a lot of LUTs. I honestly, I know I tease you, but I really like your Ultimate Sports LUTs. They're very, very handy. They're very, very good. I don't use them at 100%. Like no. I wish you could though. Like I wish you could throw out a LUT and leave it 100%. You can never can. You always have to feather it down a bit and reduce the impact of it. But they're very user friendly, and honestly, they have specific values to them, and they really, really work. Like, you have your Friday Night Lights one. Honestly, for outdoor footage and that, it works really, really well. I really enjoy the 30 for 30 for interviews and that. So I feel like you did a great job when you created those LUTs, because they all do have a purpose. And if you are in sports and you see the names, they're pretty straightforward. You know
Yeah,
what you're
those
getting.
good. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and it makes it easier. So like, and I do have other LUTs that I do use. Like I have the Matty Hapoya collection, and he has this soft film look, and I really enjoy that one because it's a little bit different. It makes everything a bit darker though, and sometimes it's a little too dark, I feel. But you know, I do for sports, I do use your LUTs quite a bit, and the fact that they're so easy to use and so straightforward, it takes a lot of the guessing out of it. And as
Hmm.
long as my white balance and my first neutral LUT is done properly, then all your LUTs look great on my footage.
No, thank you.
No, it's true. Like it's a good tool. And as editors, we're always looking for tools that help our edits, help us be creative and save us time. And they check all those boxes.
Hmm. And do you use like tools like when you're color correcting? Like, are you using like the waveform, the scopes? Like, what are you looking at, or are you just going by?
So it really depends on the project. When I'm doing this for clients and I know that they're putting this all over the place, I'll use the waveforms in that. When I'm doing my own personal stuff in that, I'll save time, man. I'll just do it by eye. I have, my monitor is very good. It's color corrected. So I'll just use my eye and save myself a lot of time. But I mean, to pull off a waveform and look at it fast and realize where you're at, I'm usually pretty good. But for clients who are paying me, I will go the extra mile and make sure that they're dialed in, because we all know as creatives, and I don't know if I've had this a lot, is people don't realize that everybody watches stuff on different screens. So like, your phone could be at one brightness, mine could be at another brightness and all that. So I try and like, go somewhere in the middle with all of that for clients, because I've had clients go, "Oh, it's too dark. Your images are too dark." And I'm like, well, "What are you watching it on?" And they're like, "I'm watching on my phone." "What's your brightness at?" "Oh, I'm at like 10%. Well, anything you watch is going to be dark. So you have to kind of explain to these people that like where you watch these videos that you export matter. So I try to be very neutral, so it's good everywhere, and I kind of, it's not too bright, it's not too dark. And I feel like that's the really real challenge, especially when you're working with clients, is like, where are you watching this stuff? Because not everybody's watching it on the same monitor, and that's what's very, very tricky. When we used to work in broadcast, you had broadcast norms for white and black, but with the internet, there are no norms, except I still try and keep those broadcast norms, so I know I'm covered. I know that my images can be viewed anywhere. And that's the hard part, I find.
Yeah, well, because the thing is that at the end of the day, it's never going to be perfect for because, like you said, different. It's the same with audio. It's just like, depending on what people are using, it's going to sound different. It's going to look different. Like the worst one for me is like my TV at home. It's sitting on the little piece of furniture there, so it's like if I'm standing up, I look at my footage, and then if I'm sitting down watching the television, it looks completely different in terms of like the contrast and saturation. So it's like just that, like on the same screen, it looks completely different just depending on where I'm at, where I'm looking from. So different screens, obviously, same thing. So you can only try to make it as good as possible from a generic, uh, properly what's the word, like not color corrected, but like anyway, a screen that's like as
Calibrated
what's the
properly,
word,
like,
calibrated, that's the
yeah.
word, yeah. So yeah, you do it on the calibrated monitor and then hope for the best, but yeah, it is what it is. But I think like that's why like I don't overthink it, like personally. Like I try to like you, I'll have my waveformer open just to make sure that my exposure makes sense, that it's not and even then, like I know that some parts will, like the whites will be way up, but then it's on the right. I look on the right in my shot, there's like a light behind me, like of course that's going to be overexposed. It's like a spotlight.
Like
So as long
windows, stuff
as,
like that,
yeah,
always,
exactly. So as long as the part where the subject looks good, like I'm good to go. So it's just monitoring it that way, make sure that that sort of makes sense. The whites and the blacks are kind of and I can tell if the shadows need to be pushed a little bit. But even then, the shadows and highlights, it's usually more just me looking at it. Same thing with the colors. Like I don't use a color scope that much. I just go by eye and what I like, and just move on from there. And then when it's time to apply a creative LUT, like you, like sometimes I don't use any. Sometimes I do. Usually, if I do like a real sequence, like a game recap, then I'll definitely do. It's more in my YouTube videos that sometimes it's just like I just try to keep everything as normal and raw looking as possible. But if I'm doing a little segment where it's like, okay, a little game edit for 30-40 seconds, I'll give it a look. So that's when I start playing with my LUTs. But even then, I'm very subtle about it. It's I use them at maybe somewhere between 20 and 40% intensity. And the one thing I do though is add, and I mentioned that in the video you talked about earlier, is I started doing that a lot more recently, like adding sharpness in my video on my footage, just because when you post it on social media, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, it doesn't matter, because the compression, a lot of the sharpness gets lost in that process. So by over sharpening a bit and make sure that the end result still has a bit of a sharpness in it. So if it does look maybe over the top when I look at it in my computer, I know that by the time it gets to YouTube, it'll be more normal. So I don't go like crazy, but maybe I add like 15, 20, something like that. Um, but yeah, I've started doing that recently, so we'll see if I stick to it. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, with creative LUTs, I say it's all a matter of trying different things and going for what you like and just not going too crazy with it. It's like sound effects. Like it's a really good tool to have, but if you go overboard, then it becomes almost like laughable, because like sound effects are just like, okay, well, calm down. Like it was just a ball hitting a net. Like you don't have to be like so loud about it. Like it doesn't need to be like in my face. And it becomes this thing where, because it's usually when LUTs are too intense or sound effects are too loud, it's one of two reasons. It's either because they're built to be like loud to begin with, so that you can tone them down, because if it was the other way around, then it would introduce noise and stuff. So it's built, so if people don't realize that, they just put it as is and they don't adjust it, they're like, oh, it looks like crap or sounds like crap. But no, it's meant to be louder than it should, so that you can take it down to the level that you need without damaging the quality of the audio or the video. And so yeah, first, that's the first reason. And the second reason that people do this is because everything they introduce in the video, they want people to know about it. It's like, I want people to be amazed by my sound design. So you don't do it consciously, but you do it. Like you want people to notice all these sound effects, because otherwise what's the point of putting them in the video if people can't hear them? So unconsciously you make them too loud, because you want them to be noticed. Same thing with the creative LUTs. Like sometimes people go overboard with the intensity because they want that look to be noticed. They think that the more intense it is, the more cinematic it is, which is not the case. So yeah, it has to be sort of on par, like from a visual perspective, it has to be on par with reality. Like it needs to look a bit cinematic, but it still needs to look like it's something that came out of the camera, not something that you added on and with 2 or 3 layers of filters and this and that. It still needs to feel natural.
I feel like that's where your base layer really comes into effect. Because if you just throw a creative look on and you didn't do the work ahead of time on your neutral layer and make sure that those whites are proper and your color balance is done, and you throw a LUT on, I find the shots that aren't in the same exposure in that, they really pop out and they look strange and they look like out of place in the edits. And then it takes you more work to do. Now I have 2 questions for you actually about your LUT package. So question 1, it's you just name it. What's your favorite go-to LUT in your package? Do you even have one?
Well, it changed
It
through
changed.
time. I think at first I was using MVP a lot, then it became MSG. But MSG has a bit of a blue tint to it, so I grew out of it, because every video had a blue tint in it. So at some point you
I
get
figure you're
then
a
it
Winter Olympics kind of guy, you know?
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, no, I haven't used that one that much, to be honest, because the Olympics ones, whether it's the summer or the winter, they have like a very the tint is very noticeable. So they're more for like specific situations. But then Team Pride I've used a lot, but like the others, I think after using it all the time, I tend to want to try something else. I was using Role Player for a long time after that, and now these days it's the 30 for 30 one that I'm using the most. I'd say just like a little subtle cinematic look, a bit grungier. It affects the colors a bit like a red, like a plain like a red will kind of look a bit darker. It'll be more like a dark red. So it's a look that you have to sort of be comfortable with. It transforms your colors a little bit. That's why the intensity for me, like it probably won't never go higher than 30%, I'd say. But yeah, I quite like it. But like yeah, to answer your question, there's no one particular one. I just like move from one to the other, and sometimes like different. Like the Hall of Famer one, for example, has like a bit of a misty kind of like feel to it, and there's also kind of a sepia kind of tint. So for very specific situations, it's great, but I wouldn't like use it on a regular basis on everything. Like,
All right. So my second question is, before you release these LUTs and these LUT packages, did you have basically these all saved as presets that you were just constantly using? And then you're like, all right, you know what? It's time to share these. Or was it something that you had a baseline and you just kept on adding little pieces to it, and then you decided to make your LUT pack?
To be honest, it's something that like I was buying and just grabbing free LUTs a bit all over the place. I've got the Matty Apoya ones as well. I had a bunch of, well, I still have them. And by looking at what other people were doing, usually I would buy a LUT pack. There would be 12 of them in there, and there'd be like one, maybe two that I liked and used. So by going through that, doing this over and over and over again, I figured, why don't I just create ones that I like, and I thought it would be a good idea to make them specific to sports, and it could become something that I sell to sports videographer. So once I got that idea, I was like, all right, look, so how can I make them relevant and different from each other? So I was like, oh yeah, let's make one that's more for outdoors. Let's make one that's more for like dark gyms. Let's make one that's more for stadiums. Let's make one that's more for cinematic look. So from there I kind of ran away with that idea and worked on them individually. And once I had like 12 of them, I was like, let's do it.
Okay. Good to know. See, I never made LUTs. But this is going to link us to our next topic. Now, supposedly AI can make LUTs. Have you tried this? I haven't tried,
No.
but people have been saying they can. And AI now is becoming, supposedly there's ways you can do color correction and white balance in that with AI. Now, where do you think this is going or headed towards? I mean, I think you can always take a screenshot of your image and throw it into AI and ask for a white balance opinion or how you can add contrast and all that. I think it could be useful. I just don't know where the industry is going with this. You know, like, do you feel like Premiere Pro, Lumitri will add an AI kind of plugin or aid?
Well, I guess when you color pick, it's kind of an AI thing. Like but yeah, I think it definitely is going in that direction, and it's probably a good thing if AI can analyze your entire clip and adjust the colors throughout. Why not? If it does a good job, and if you can customize it to your liking, that would be an ideal situation. I've never used AI to create any type of presets, whether it's for LUTs or anything else, but I'm not surprised to learn that it can do that. But yeah, I think it's like anything. It's like for me, for example, like I use Photoshop fairly often for my thumbnails and things like that, and the more AI tools, the better. Like it helps me create different things. Like my girlfriend's a real estate agent. She took photos of a place where there was like stuff on the grounds and new windows or stickers in the windows, I was able to remove all of that for her, and easy peasy. Like in Photoshop, it's now super easy, where a few years ago it would have been like hours of work. So if tools like that allow someone like me who just knows roughly what to do, but is in any way, shape, or form not a professional Photoshop user, if it allows me to do like things that I wouldn't be able to do, then I'm all for it. But you have to be able to trust your vision and your taste and what you want. Like, don't just let AI take the decisions, like the creative decisions. I mean,
Yeah, I think it's headed in that way. I mean, like we already have like auto tone, but it doesn't work that great. But there's like Premiere has like scene detection. I thought that was always a big one, where you can take like a full clip or say an old exported clip, you put in scene detection, and it'll make a cut everywhere there's a cut, right? And I feel like with some of the new Premiere plugins and that, there will be some AI options to help with color, but I feel like you're always going to have the final say to kind of adjust it the way that you want to. Now, in photography, there's a lot of AI softwares that claim to have plugins for Lightroom that you can kind of pick your style. You drop in like 200 photos, and it's supposed to edit all these photos exactly as you want. Now, I know a couple people who've used it, and that's not so much the case. It keeps it for the first, say, 10 to 30, and then it kind of gets lost along the way. And then the final ones. So you have to really go through them all anyway and kind of check to see how your colors are, especially if you're handing off to clients. So even in Premiere Pro, for AI to do color correction in that, I think it's definitely a good starting point or stepping stone, but I don't think it's capable, or I wouldn't trust it fully with my project. It's one of those things you're going to have to double check. You're going to have to go over to make sure that it's perfect, because you're not going to want to hand over to a client one day and not have really checked out the white balance that the computer had done. At least not right now anyway. But I do feel like it's on that path, because like I don't know about you, but I get emails, hey, you do the editing, we'll do the color correcting. Like there's companies out there that offer to just do color correcting for you. I think it's cool if you really want to save time. I don't need to save that much time. I could do my own color correction, but maybe some people out there might need that. So if you did do that, I would love to hear from you. Right in the comments, because I would like to see how that process is going. Have you seen that online? The guys that offer color correction in that, you sign up for a monthly subscription and they just color correct your videos.
no, never. I got offered editing services, but not color correction specifically.
So it's similar to the editing services, but it's color correction specific. And what they do is like you handle the creative part, you handle the edit, we'll handle the tedious coloring part.
Yeah, but then that means you have to send them all the raw footage, or otherwise you send them a copy of your final edit and then they send you a copy of theirs. So there's a lot of like
Back and forth.
generations that are being lost in the process. Every time you export, you kind of lose a bit of quality. So I wouldn't be a big fan of doing it that way. But and if you're going it the full quality way, which is to send them the actual raw clips, then the time that you spend doing that is probably the same amount of time you would have spent doing the color correction in the first place.
I didn't go that deep into it, but yeah, I guess, yeah, I don't know how it works. AI is definitely going to help us with color and help us with creativity. It's just at what point does it come into our software automatically?
Well, no, I'm sure. Yeah, it's definitely coming, and it's definitely going to be like, for example, like with like again, I go back to Photoshop. I don't know why, but like when I start with an image, I'll just open the camera raw uh, filter thing and just put auto, and it's gonna adjust the colors and the exposure and everything, and that will be my starting point. Like I never just leave it at that, but that's my starting point, and then I'll adjust a bit. I'll probably push the exposure a little bit, play with the shadows, which is everything I do in video as well, by the way. Like it's play with the shadows and highlights and all that sort of stuff, and then I'll adjust the sharpness and maybe do some noise removal, and then it's the playing with that fine line of like, do I want more details and more noise, or less details and less noise, and you find that point that you're comfortable with. And but all that started with the actual software making the basic decisions, and then me jumping in and overseeing everything and micromanaging every single one of those decisions, basically.
I used Lightroom a couple weeks ago, and I had a shot that was dark, and I boosted up the exposure in that. And there's this new feature in it, that the noise reduction in it, and super sharp. And I click both those now. It takes probably like say 20 seconds each one to do it, but the results were phenomenal. Like I was so impressed. It looked like I actually shot it at the right exposure, because obviously I didn't. That I had to fix it, but it's coming a long way, and it will be interesting to see all that when it comes to video, because photo is a lot easier to manipulate than video.
True.
All right. I think we covered everything pretty much, or what?
Yeah.
Well, this is it for this episode of Game Day Glare.
So yeah.